believing I was somehow unique, like a snowflake, distinct among snowflakes, unique in each way you can see. And now after some thinking, I'd say I'd rather be a functioning cog in some great machinery, serving something beyond me. But I don't know what that will be. I'll get back to you someday, soon you will see. What's my name? What's my station? Oh, just tell me what I should do. I don't need to be kind to the armies of night that would do such injustice to you. Or bow down and be grateful and say, sure, take all that you see. To the men who move only in dimly lit halls and determine my future for me. And I don't know who to believe. I'll get back to you someday, soon you will see. If I know only one thing, it's that everything that I see of the world outside is so inconceivable. Often I barely can speak. Yeah, I'm tongue-tied and dizzy, and I can't keep it to myself. What good is it to sing helplessness blues? Why should I wait for anyone else? And I know you will keep me on the shelf. I'll get back to you someday, soon myself. If I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm raw. If I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm sore. And you would wait tables and soon run the store. Gold hair in the sunlight, my light in the dark. If I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm sore. If I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm sore. Oh, someday I'll be like the man on the screen.
Welcome, friends, in person and online, welcome into this sanctuary, this communal space for all souls. Whether you arrive today with lightness and ease, or you come with a heavy heart seeking refuge from dark places, we hope that on this wintry morning you feel the warmth of our welcome, one that strives to embrace all with acts of love. My name is James Plazer, and I'll be your worship leader today. My pronouns are he and him. And we light our chalice today with the words of Reverend Leslie Takahashi, who writes, "All that we have ever loved and all that we have ever been stands with us on the brink of all that we aspire to create. A deeper peace, a larger love, a more embracing hope, a deeper joy in this life we share. Let us join our voices and worship together." Rise, if you will, in body or spirit, and join for our first hymn.
Good morning, All Souls. We're going to get us all warmed up this morning with a little canon. The choir's going to sing it through all together a couple of times, and then we invite us to join in sections. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, Section 4. There are so many of you up there. Welcome. Good morning. Okay. And we'll see you at the end.
Good morning. My name is Carrie Reichs, and I'll be your worship associate today, and Happy Lunar New Year. Welcome to All Souls Church, where our ministry has thrived for 200 years. Welcome to this place where all people of all races, national origins, creeds, gender identities and expressions, sexual orientations, ages, and abilities, all people are welcome at the table of love and fellowship. As Unitarian Universalists, we are diverse in many ways, but united in our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person and in the obligation to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. We gather in person and on Zoom from around the world for worship, music, social justice, solace, celebration, ceremony, and more. I'd like to extend a special welcome to any guests this morning. If you are visiting our sanctuary for the first time or still feel new here, maybe you could raise your hand so that we can give you an All Souls welcome. Are there any visitors today? We're glad you're here. If you're in the sanctuary, the order of service can be accessed by the QR code in the back of the pew in front of you. Select the left code, or you may request a printed program from an usher. For those on Zoom, a link to the order of service is in the chat. Our weekly email newsletter is a terrific way to stay up to date on all the events and cool stuff that's going on in the community right now. If you are not currently subscribed, sign up through the link on the All Souls website, or if you're on Zoom, through the link in the chat. All Souls recognizes that our city and our church was built on lands taken from Indigenous people, and we lament this injustice. The closest village to our church site was the Nacotchtank, from which the name Anacostia is derived. The residents were part of the Piscataway group of tribes present in the DC and Maryland region. These peoples remain in the region to this day. If you're joining us from further away, I encourage you to research the native people of the land where you reside. And for all of us who aren't native to this land, one way to practice our commitment to the 8th principle is to find out what native organizing is happening in your area and how you can support it. Now is the time we call the beholding. If you're on Zoom, I encourage you to turn on your video and open up your gallery screen and greet each other. And we can even now see you in the sanctuary. And so let's all turn and wave to the folks joining us on Zoom. And if you're in the sanctuary, please greet each other in the manner that feels safest and most comfortable for you. Let the beholding begin. Everybody has a lot to chat about this morning. Thank you. Again, welcome, and look forward to enjoying more conversations with everyone. We obviously have a lot to say, so grab a coffee and visit the ministry fair and visit after services, and welcome to All Souls Church.
Greetings to all on this overcast January Sunday. I start today with a special welcome. My colleague, James Plazer, is certainly no stranger to this pulpit. Having served as liturgist on several occasions and helped lead countless coming-of-age services, but this year, in addition to continuing his role as our Associate Director of Religious Education for Youth and Children, he is also doing a field education internship as part of his studies at Wesley Seminary. And today marks his debut preaching and leading worship at All Souls. So please join me in offering James. He has a whole section up here. So welcome to those of you who are ongoing members or occasional participants. We're glad you're here too. There are two noteworthy events happening after worship today and two further out that I want to lift up. First, happening on site today and available virtually as well is our biannual Find Your Ministry Fair. Come to Pierce Hall after the service or check the website to learn more about groups and ministries here at All Souls and discover where you fit in. And if you're here in person, you can also stop by the religious education table and say hi to Laura Prophet, our fabulous new acting director of religious education. And happening after that is a program here in the sanctuary called Adams Morgan, Neighborhood Justice as a Spiritual Practice. All are invited to come learn how historic organizing and activism around banking and housing empowerment for low-income people by visionary leaders in the 1970s were a key part of why these neighborhoods have retained their multicultural characteristics. There are more information about the Find Your Ministry Fair and that event on the back of the program. And if you're staying around between Find Your Ministry Fair and the Neighborhood Justice event, I encourage you to get lunch at one of our many fabulous neighborhood restaurants. Next Sunday, January 29th, is a big milestone. It will be Leonard Stark's last time leading music as director of the Jubilee Singers. Please join us as we celebrate Leonard's nearly 25-year ministry at All Souls in worship and with a luncheon afterward. And if you'd like to share a message of gratitude, please do so on the Kudo board. Links to the Kudo board are at the front desk and at the music table at the Find Your Ministry Fair. And last, but certainly not least, for those ready for membership at All Souls, whether you're local or virtual, the next joining class starts with an online session on Monday, February 6th, and concludes with either an in-person lunch or a virtual event. You can register on the church's calendar. As we transition to congregational care, I start first with a national concern. My plan had been to simply wish everyone a happy Lunar New Year, saying farewell to the year of the tiger and ushering in the year of the rabbit, a year that is supposed to be characterized by calm and peace. But instead, I lift up that last night, another mass shooting claimed at least 10 lives in Monterey Park, California, at a Lunar New Year festival. We don't yet know who the shooter was or why they did what they did, but we certainly know the impact. And we know who feels the impact the most: the people, the communities that are consistently targets of this kind of violence. Let's take a moment now, collectively. We know that prayers are not enough, but we can at least pray. So let us pray in silence together in lament of those lost. Thank you. Our AAPI Souls group will meet in person after the service today in the library. It is not online, it is in person here in the library. Here at All Souls, we wish Reverend Louise Green, our Minister of Congregational Care, safe travels. She will be in Mexico, January 20th to the 30th, serving as a guest preacher at the UU Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. I will be the contact while she is gone, so please reach out to me with any congregational care issues. The date of the memorial service for Margaret Wilson has changed slightly and is now next Saturday, January 28th, at 2 p.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Arlington, where she was also a member. We sent healing prayers to Mel Hardy, who is recovering from a hip injury. And 2 causes for celebration today. We wish happy 95th birthdays to both Waveney Bryant and Caroline Boston. I invite you now to speak aloud or type into the chat the names you carry on your heart this morning. Please join me in prayer. Spirit of life and love, God of beginnings, endings, and new beginnings, be with us. Help us cherish what is important and let go of what is not. Fill us with the courage to be who we truly are as individuals, and also the wisdom to know that we are stronger in community. Help us make the decisions we must, however easy or hard, to care for ourselves, for each other, and for our world. Help us to know love and to spread love. Amen.
Our text for today is a story that I learned several years ago during a period of rather intensive study at a meditation and mindfulness center, a local Buddhist center here. It's the backstory to a famous quote by Suzuki Roshi, the founder of the San Francisco Zen Center, who is credited with helping popularize Zen Buddhism in the West. And as I was told it, by folks from a non-Zen Buddhist tradition, mind you, the story goes like this. Although he was generally excited about the possibilities of teaching Westerners, Suzuki Roshi would sometimes despair at their utter lack of discipline. Many of the early students were, after all, beatniks, proto-hippies of sorts who prided themselves on rejecting the rigid norms and traditions of the West. Now, eventually, Suzuki Roshi became fed up with the students' refusal to sit up straight, use their cushions properly, and otherwise failing or perhaps refusing to follow certain norms he sought to instill in their collective practice. He took a short leave from teaching and returned to Japan. And upon seeing his own mentor and explaining his frustrations, his teacher reminded him that if he was to walk the spiritual path laid before him, he must not only model Buddhist discipline, but also Buddhist acceptance. And thus Suzuki Roshi returns to his students in the States, and on the first day back in their meditation sitting session, some students are upright and poised, while many, perhaps most, are slouching or maybe even lounging. And he says something like, "It is good to be back. While I was away, I have been reminded the following," the famous quote. "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you could use a little improvement." Join me, if you will, in a brief moment of mindfulness or prayer. Spirit of life, God of many names, humbler of ambitions, unifier of all that is, may all within hearing, including and perhaps especially the speaker, proceed today with an open mind and open heart. Be willing to be changed by what transpires in your presence. May it be so, and amen. So it is truly an honor to be here today with you. As Rob mentioned earlier, I am finishing seminary studies and here today in that capacity. I can't help but be aware of the prophetic legacy of this pulpit, and despite my nerves, I will strive to uphold and continue the proud tradition of those who have stood here before. So I don't know about you, though, but when it comes to my more deeply held beliefs, I have quite a stubborn streak in me. I don't like being told what to do or what to think, what is right or wrong, true or false. I need to decide and find out for myself. I tend to respect the same in others. And from a young age, I've always felt a strong allegiance to nonconformists, hippies, outlaws, anyone who refused to be told what to do and went their own way. They were expanding the boundaries of human freedom and liberty, and thus my heroes. Freedom, I had been taught, and I had come to reason for myself, seemed to be just the greatest of good things. And while I am mostly proud of the justice-yearning free-thinkingness of those of my formative years, it has not always made things easy. Before setting foot inside this sanctuary in 2008, I had been going it alone for quite a while. The weight of the world and of the revolution I sought to be a part of was on my shoulders, I thought, and I was burning out as an activist and labor organizer. Delusional to think the whole weight was on my shoulders, but the result was real nonetheless. My health was suffering, and I was emotionally and spiritually distraught. I was also fortunate. I had my youth, a job that covered expenses, and most of all, a social network to offer advice. Many suggested I find a spiritual community, and several specifically suggested All Souls. But true to form, I resisted fiercely. Long prior, I had rejected the religion of my upbringing and could not for the life of me envision this place being much different. And there was also just that stubbornness in me that couldn't imagine anyone else's solutions working on my problems. A terminal case of uniqueness, I've heard this called. Despite trusting my friends and their values, I ignored assurances that this was a true home for spiritual progressives. So even though there are healthy, reasonably happy, seemingly grounded people right in front of me telling me where they go for fulfillment, I am certain, based on ideas I had formulated mostly in the 4th grade, mind you, that it will not work for me. I was ready to push away any solution you could offer because, well, sometimes that's what rugged individuals, what free people do. Finally, though, the internal turmoil reached a painful degree such that I was willing to try something different. I came in as a visitor, alone, sat in the back of the balcony in the least conspicuous place I could find. I didn't raise my hand when invited. So if you didn't either today or recently or whenever, I identify. And it turned out that I was one of us who cries on the first day here. And if I am to be honest, the tears were more like sobs, and they were many, though I stifled them and did my best to make them go unnoticed. Even then, I had to maintain my own delusion that I had things under control. But for me, the levee really broke when you said how all are welcome, regardless of who you are or who you love, regardless of age or race or sexual orientation or gender identity. Another wave of tears upon hearing this is not a place concerned about making others believe their dogma, but in seeing justice done in the world. These were not the values of my childhood religion, but this radical inclusiveness, this vision for a better world, this was the central principle, proudly touted at the outset. It was like fulfillment of a dream I didn't know I had, or perhaps a divine prescription I didn't know had been written and was withering in my pocket. I never felt anything like it, nor imagined such a place could possibly exist. So it is a blessing, I believe, that our tradition makes itself so widely available that even the stubborn among us, like ourselves, can find a type of salvation in it. Because I don't know about you, but as much as I might still chafe against the Christian notions I was raised on, I know I still sometimes need a little saving. So that radical inclusion, the religious liberty, that freedom of conscience, these are at the heart of the unique blessing offered by today's Unitarian Universalism. And they are very, very good things. Gifts from our spiritual ancestors, seekers and nonconformists, spiritual rebels all, who transformed the landscape of American intellectual and spiritual life. And yet, these same thinkers, Thoreau, Emerson, Fuller, and others, my heroes, are also credited with embedding the ethic of modern individualism so deep into the fabric of American culture. And so I cannot sometimes help but wonder if we don't also suffer certain consequences from an excess of this very good thing, from our emphasis on freedom, from the wide open terrain of individual choice, individuality in our religion. Before proceeding further, though, let me assure you, I am emphatically not concerned about too much freedom as it relates to our identities. In a time when opportunistic political and media figures are sowing division and hatred through the weaponization of trans identity and racial identity, let us be clear. There is no such thing as too much of that kind of freedom. It is sacrosanct in our faith and, dare I say, in general. It is the core of the saving grace of our first UU principle, that we truly affirm without exception the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the freedom to be our truest selves. But what about also becoming our best selves? Last fall, Reverend Bill poignantly put it this way, that while the inclusive embrace of our tradition welcomes all of us to come as we are into UU communities, that does not mean we are free to stay as we are. In other words, our individuality, all individualities even, are welcomed, no matter what. But we are also supposed to transform, to grow, to change. But how exactly will this work? What does Unitarian Universalism offer us to achieve this? In theory, it is the work of our third principle, which encourages us to spiritual growth in our congregations. But there is a structural tension here. With such freedom and taking such care as we do not to offend each other's individuality, how do we push one another to grow, personally and spiritually? How do we counteract the individualism that most of us dislike in our politics, but which is baked into our spiritual tradition? How can we hold one another accountable when we are free to set our own expectations for moral conduct? How do we muster the discipline to work and create together when we tend to reject the rigidity that can also make us reliable? How do we imagine, much less construct, a just community when it's so darn hard to agree on the building materials? This, I believe, is one of the great challenges of Unitarian Universalism and of our progressive culture more broadly. To illustrate further, let's take a moment to think of, well, I think of our coming-of-age students. These are our high school youth who enroll in a special program to study our religion, its history, values, practices. The program culminates in a worship service that they design, which instead of a sermon, the students recite their credos, a brief statement of what they have come to believe, having explored various spiritual approaches to the world. Stay tuned for this year's installment in May. Your turn, just a couple months. Spoiler alert, but invariably, at some point in the program, the students learn that the correct answer to my questions like, what is the UU way to approach X situation or Y concept? That the answer always starts with, it depends. And so one student or another will raise their hand and say, so if we can believe anything at all, why does it matter if we believe anything at all? If it's all allowed, it's all the same, right? Typically the same or another student will chime in with maybe an even more damning follow-up. And isn't believing in everything the same as believing in nothing? Why would we study an empty religion? Now, mind you, these comments, in my assessment, are generally made in good faith. 80% at least, maybe 20% trying to not be in a church basement at 1 p.m. in the afternoon on a weekend. But this pushback, I'm pleased to hear, because it means they are truly thinking deeply about the implications of our spiritual orientation. So I'll put it back to their peers and ask how they make sense of it. Eventually, through hard work, as a group, we find our way to something like this. Unitarian Universalism is trying to imagine a world where no one forces anyone else to believe the same thing they believe. It might seem like a blank canvas to us now, but it's only our own small patch that's empty. And the church actually trusts us to paint something good on it. The rest of the canvas is what others do and others believe, and it all combines to make an intricate whole. And if it were just a bunch of isolated little canvases, we could never create the sort of community, nor have the sort of impact on the world that we desire. And thus we come to believe, or come to understand, that our tradition, blessing though it may be, is perhaps better understood less as a gift that I perceived on that first teary day, and more as a challenge. Unitarian Universalism, this gift of progressive culture, is what we make of it. It is that action word, make. And here's where the overwhelming, sometimes stifling effect of choice and freedom can get us. With limitless possibility and all of them optional, it is actually quite easy to choose nothing at all, to never quite decide what to believe. I'm always amazed how many adults will come up after our coming of age session and say, can we write our own credos? Can we decide what we believe? Yes, you can. Please do. If we choose no action at all, we can stay more or less the same person who first arrived here. And if we content ourselves to rest on the laurels of our forebears or on the virtue of our passive beliefs, our tradition can actually become little more than the empty vessel my students bump up against. And where a tradition becomes empty, there is little salvation to be had, much less that personalized feeling kind that came to my aid years ago. And so how do we make Unitarian Universalism what we hope it to be, and ensure the community remains strong and ready to receive an ongoing influx of seekers and rebels and souls needing steadiness, and to make the world a better place? I believe it is by rising to Bill's challenge and refusing to stay as we are, and I believe that happens by taking action. I believe it is by crafting what I would call a culture of spiritual practice and social structures to support it, so that we can not only get involved, but get truly present to ourselves and to one another as we do so. We are still regathering at All Souls, and we still have a chance to decide how to rebuild. We have a chance to do it together, to let go of anything that might prevent us from being in community, anything that can help us identify out instead of joining in. For my part, I'm planning to recommit to my meditation practice, and I invite your collective accountability. Feel free when you see me to say, hey, how's that going? And maybe I'll ask you if you found a practice that's working for you. We are already doing so much in this congregation, but there is more we can do, and there are ways to do it that are mutually supportive of one another if we do it together. We can make habits of personal practices like journaling or dance or yoga or walking or whatever is necessary for ourselves, so that when we arrive here or elsewhere, we arrive as authentically and grounded and present as possible, ready to experience the blessings of others and to offer our blessings and our gifts to this community. We can create new groups for spiritual practice or covenant groups, provide them with this support that they need to sustain themselves. We can join one of our excellent choirs or musical programs, amazing examples of these ideas that are already in action. We can recommit to any of the classes or work that are going on at All Souls. We can attend the Find Your Ministry Fair, sign up for something, commit just till the end of the church year, and decide to make that our practice. More than anything, I hope that we can gather together more often, less formally, with more space before and after, to just be with one another, socializing as we do in clusters that transform, learning from one another, small parts of this beautiful whole. To paraphrase the great Howard Thurman, we should do whatever makes us come alive, because for whatever else it might need. The world needs people who have come alive. If we do these things in relationship with one another, we can come to know when our fierce independence goes from being a good thing, of which we can be proud, to too much of a good thing. And faith-filled community can help us notice and correct for these excesses of character. So this is the charge I lay upon us, and I believe that together we can do it. We can ensure that Unitarian Universalism be an active faith and a fulfilling one, through and through. And may it be that our activity be commotion, blessed and messy and imperfect, but successful in rooting ourselves in ourselves and with one another. And if there be emptiness in our faith or in our theology, let it be only the space that we leave with intention, so that it may find its way full, filled and refilled, again and again, with love. If the Spirit wills it, may it be so. Amen. Amen.
That's not a difficult act to follow or anything. I'm what my mother calls a recovering lawyer. In 2005, I left my large law firm job to become a full-time writer. But you can take the lawyer out of the firm, but not the law out of the lawyer. So many of my novels center on questions of legal and medical ethics because they fascinate me. In my third book, my editor had to, gently, because writers and emotions, convinced me that 6 pages elucidating the derivation of the right to choose from the constitutional penumbra of privacy and the challenging subset question of embryo personhood was not, in fact, fascinating reading for everyone. I'm still not convinced. Another nerdy fascination of mine is the economic and ecological concept of the tragedy of the commons. Originated by British economist William Foster Lloyd in 1833 and popularized by Garrett Hardin in 1968, the tragedy of the commons describes the situation where individual users with unregulated access to a shared resource act according to their own self-interest and contrary to the common good, depleting the resource through uncoordinated action. The name comes from the famed hypothetical of unregulated grazing on the commons. As philosopher Aristotle foresaw, that which is common to the greatest number gets the least amount of care. Men pay most attention to what is their own, and they care less for what is common. As a mother, I'm constantly surprised that the hospital simply let me walk out the front door with babies, like I was an adult or something. And I kept looking around for an adult to make better informed choices, and in that horrifying moment realized that I was an adult. And then I looked for an adultier adult, like someone better at adulting than me. And I started reflecting on what makes an adult. And I've settled on 2 things. 1, making hard choices. And 2, loving something more than yourself. Making difficult choices is how we as individuals grow. We may not always make the right choice, but the act of making a decision is a process toward critical thinking and maturity. To take away the ability to choose is to infantilize a person or a group and stunt development. It also infers, incorrectly, that some individuals have superior rights to make decisions than others. Roe v. Wade recognized the essential need for autonomy and equity in each individual's right to choose. The flip side of the coin of individuality is loving something more than yourself. This requires self-regulation, self-discipline, and sacrifice, counter to the tragedy of the commons, and recognition that we must work together to thrive as a community, democracy, and planet. So I'm particularly excited to discuss this month's All Souls selection for our Share Your Plate approach to Sunday collection, where we select a different recipient organization each month and share 50% of our weekly offerings, because it exemplifies both collaborative spirit and choice. All Souls Church is one of the founding sponsors of a new national organization called Sacred, the Spiritual Alliance of Communities for Reproductive Dignity, which you can learn more about at sacreddignity.org. And they are a January recipient. Sacred is an alliance of organizers, religious leaders, academics, and congregations working together to advance the cause of reproductive justice through congregational designation and community building programs. And our own Reverend Rob Keithan is one of several UUs on the Sacred Steering Committee. And the Unitarian Universalist Association is also a leading supporter of this new organization. Sacred was selected in part because today, January 22nd, 2023, marks 50 years since Roe v. Wade decision was handed down. While many people of color and people with low incomes never had sufficient access, the overturning of Roe is and will have the worst impact on these communities. All Souls Reproductive Freedom Project is helping recruit volunteers to support significantly increased number of people traveling to this area for care, as well as looking at other ways to help make the difference here in DC. We invite you to give generously today to help Sacred and All Souls build a strong, multi-faith movement for reproductive justice. Today's offering will now be given and received. Thank you.
Justice does not allow that the sacrifices imposed on a few are outweighed by the larger sum of advantages enjoyed by the many.
Find nature.
In every middle and high school class I have led in my time at All Souls, we have closed with a saying, sometimes called a proverb, that well fits our occasion. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So may we root deep, may we take time for one another, and may our furthest out dreams of justice and community someday become reality. Go with purpose, go with love. Amen.
Amen.